English Channel is a graveyard of timber and bone, where the tides hide secrets beneath the rolling waves. Among the most treacherous stretches of water lies a place known as the Goodwin Sands, located 6 miles off the coast of Deal in Kent. This shifting mass of sandbanks has swallowed more than 2,000 ships throughout recorded history, earning it the grim title of the Great Ship Swallower. While many vessels have met their end upon these banks due to storms or navigational errors, there is one wreck that refuses to remain buried. It is a story not of accidental tragedy, but of deliberate malice born from the darkest corners of the human heart. The tale of the Lady Lovibond is a legend that has chilled the blood of sailors for nearly 3 centuries. The story begins on a freezing Friday, the 13th, in February of the year 1748. The schooner known as the Lady Lovibond prepared to set sail from London bound for Oporto in Portugal. She was a beautiful 3-masted vessel filled with the laughter and joy of a wedding party. The captain of the ship was a man named Simon Reed, who had just married the lovely Annetta. In a time when sailors held deeply rooted superstitions regarding women, aboard ship's Captain Reed threw caution to the wind. He was so enamored with his new bride that he brought her aboard to celebrate their cruise along the River Thames and out into the open sea. The ship was decorated with white ribbons, and the wine flowed freely among the crew and guests. Below the decks, the atmosphere was one of unbridled celebration and merriment as toasts were raised to the happy couple. The cabin was warm and illuminated by the golden glow of lantern light, casting dancing shadows against the wooden bulkheads. Captain Simon Reed sat with his arm around Annetta, beaming with pride and looking forward to a prosperous life together. The guests included friends and family who were oblivious to the ancient mariner lore that claimed a woman on a ship brought bad luck. They sang songs and shared stories while the ship cut through the dark waters of the Thames estuary. However, not everyone on board shared in the joy of the occasion. One man sat in the corner, nursing a mug of ale, with a heart turning black with envy. John Rivers served as the first mate of the Lady Lovibond, and he had served alongside Simon Reed for years. Rivers had performed his duties well and was considered a trusted friend by the captain, so much so that he had been the best man at the wedding. But beneath the surface of his calm demeanor, a violent storm was brewing. Rivers had secretly loved Annetta for a long time, and watching her marry another man had shattered his mind. Every smile she bestowed upon Captain Reed felt like a dagger twisting in his gut. As the night wore on and the alcohol took hold, the resentment in his soul began to boil over into a dangerous rage. He watched the happy couple with eyes that had lost all trace of humanity. The celebration continued late into the night as the Lady Lovibond sailed past the coast of Kent, approaching the treacherous Goodwin Sands. The weather was clear, and the sea was relatively calm, which should have guaranteed a safe passage past the notorious hazard. Captain Reed remained below deck, distracted by his bride, and the festivities, trusting his crew to navigate the familiar waters. He had no reason to suspect that the man he trusted most in the world was currently plotting his destruction. John Rivers rose from his seat in the corner and made his way up the companionway stairs to the quarterdeck. The cold night air did nothing to cool the burning hatred that consumed him as he looked out at the dark horizon. On the deck, the helmsman stood at the wheel, guiding the ship steadily through the channel. The sails were full, and the Lady Lovibond was making good speed under the starlight. Rivers approached the helmsman with a heavy belaying pin gripped tightly in his hand behind his back. The unsuspecting sailor nodded to the first mate, believing him to be checking on the course. Rivers did not return the gesture. In a sudden burst of violence, he brought the heavy iron pin down upon the head of the steersman. The man crumpled to the deck without a sound, leaving the wheel unattended. John Rivers stepped over the unconscious body and gripped the spokes of the wheel, his knuckles turning white. The madness had fully taken hold of John Rivers as he looked toward the white foam breaking over the Goodwin Sands in the distance. He knew exactly where the danger lay, and he knew that steering the ship into it would mean death for everyone on board. He did not care. If he could not have Annetta, then no one would. With a maniacal grimace, he spun the wheel hard to starboard, directing the Lady Lovibond straight toward the heart of the deadly sands. The ship responded instantly, her bow swinging away from the safety of the deep channel and aiming for the churning breakers. Below deck, the sudden lurch of the vessel caused wine glasses to spill and the laughter to falter. Captain Reed sensed the change in the motion of the ship and realized something was wrong. He excused himself from Annetta and the guests rushing toward the stairs to check on the course. He expected to find a shift in the wind or a minor navigational correction, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality above. As he emerged onto the deck, the roar of the breaking waves was deafening. He saw John Rivers at the wheel, with a look of pure insanity etched upon his face. The ship was hurtling toward the sands at full speed, and it was already too late to turn back. Reed shouted out to his friend, but Rivers only laughed a chilling sound that was swallowed by the wind. The impact was catastrophic and tore through the wooden hull with the force of a thunderclap. The Lady Lovibond slammed into the Goodwin Sands with such violence that her masts snapped like twigs and crashed onto the deck. The sudden stop threw the passengers and crew around like dolls breaking bones and extinguishing the lanterns below. The sounds of celebration were instantly replaced by screams of terror and pain. Water rushed into the fractured hull, dragging the schooner down into the sucking embrace of the quicksand. John Rivers remained at the wheel, laughing into the spray as the ocean rose up to claim them all. In moments, the Lady Lovibond and everyone aboard vanished beneath the waves. The next morning, there was no trace of the schooner or the wedding party that had been so full of life. The Goodwin Sands had claimed another victim, adding the Lady Lovibond to its vast collection of lost ships. The tragedy was recorded in the logs of the day, and the people of Deal mourned the loss of the young couple and their guests. It seemed as though the story had ended there buried under tons of sand and water. But the energy of such a violent and emotional event does not simply dissipate. The hatred of John Rivers and the terror of the wedding party had imprinted itself upon the atmosphere, creating a haunting that would span centuries. 50 years passed, and the tragedy of the Lady Lovibond faded into a local legend told by old sailors in the taverns of Deal. It was now the 13th of February in the year 1798. The coasting vessel, Edinburgh, was navigating the Goodwin Sands on a clear night. The captain of the Edinburgh was a seasoned mariner named James Westlake. As he looked out across the water, he saw a 3-masted schooner bearing down on him with all sails set. He shouted for his crew to alter course, believing a collision was imminent. The strange ship passed so close that Westlake could hear the sounds of a party and female laughter drifting across the water. Captain Westlake and his crew watched in amazement as the phantom ship sailed straight toward the Goodwin Sands. They expected to see it run aground and break apart, just as the Lady Lovibond had done half a century earlier. The vessel hit the sands and vanished into thin air, leaving only the sound of the wind and the waves. Westlake reported the sighting when he reached port, describing the ship in vivid detail. His description matched the Lady Lovibond perfectly, right down to the white ribbons decorating the masts. The locals realized that the 50-year anniversary of the tragedy had marked the return of the phantom Brigantine. Another 50 years turned the pages of history, bringing the date to February 13th in the year 1848. The world had changed, and steam was beginning to replace sail. But the curse of the Goodwin Sands remained constant. On this night, several fishing boats from Deal were working near the sands. The fishermen were tough men who knew the waters better than anyone. Suddenly, they saw a schooner emerge from the darkness, heading for the breakers. The men were convinced they were witnessing a real shipwreck in progress. They abandoned their nets and rowed frantically toward the vessel, hoping to save souls from the freezing water. As the lifeboat crews approached the location of the wreck, they prepared themselves for the sight of bodies and debris. They had seen the ship strike the sands and break up with their own eyes. But when they arrived at the spot, there was nothing. No timbers floating on the surface, and no cries for help. The water was empty and calm. The fishermen were baffled and unsettled. They returned to Deal and shared their story, only to be reminded by the elders of the town that it was the 50th anniversary of the Lady Lovibond wreck. The ghost ship had reenacted its doom once again for a new generation of witnesses. The legend grew with each passing generation, and the people of Kent began to anticipate the return of the phantom ship. The next expected appearance was in 1898. On the designated night, the coastguards at Deal were on high alert, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. The weather was poor, with mist obscuring visibility across the channel. Despite the conditions, multiple witnesses reported seeing a schooner in distress near the Goodwin Sands. The sightings were so convincing that the lifeboat was launched immediately. The brave volunteers rowed out into the gloom, ready to perform a rescue. When the lifeboat reached the coordinates of the sighting, they found the same eerie emptiness that their ancestors had encountered. There was no ship and no wreckage. The crew searched the area, thoroughly unwilling to believe that their eyes had deceived them. They found nothing but the cold, rolling sea. The realization set in that they had been chasing a ghost. The Lady Lovibond had appeared exactly on schedule, adhering to its 50-year cycle of torment. The story was published in newspapers, spreading the fame of the phantom Brigantine far beyond the coast of Kent. By the time 1948 arrived, the legend of the Lady Lovibond had become one of the most famous ghost stories in England. Curiosity seekers and paranormal enthusiasts gathered in Deal, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spectral ship. The night was cold, and the anticipation was palpable. Among the witnesses was a Captain Bull, an Italian mariner who was navigating the channel. He reported seeing a schooner surrounded by a strange green glow. He described hearing the sounds of a celebration that turned into screams before the ship disintegrated upon the sands. His account added a terrifying new detail to the lore. Captain Bull was not the only one to see something that night. Residents of the coastal towns reported strange lights out at sea and the sound of phantom bells ringing over the water. The 1948 appearance confirmed for many that the curse was still active and powerful. The green glow described by the Italian captain suggested a residual energy that was becoming more visible with time. It was as if the emotional intensity of the murder-suicide committed by John Rivers was burning a hole through the fabric of reality, allowing the past to bleed into the present. The cyclic nature of the haunting suggests that the souls aboard the Lady Lovibond are trapped in a perpetual loop of death. They are forced to relive the betrayal and the crash every 50 years, unable to move on to the afterlife. It is a hell made of salt water and sand, presided over by the mad spirit of the first mate. Some paranormal theorists believe that the Goodwin Sands acts as a battery, storing the energy of the thousands of lives lost there. The Lady Lovibond is simply the most prominent manifestation of a much larger and darker phenomenon that permeates the area. As the year 1998 approached, the media interest in the Lady Lovibond reached a fever pitch. Television crews and ghost hunters descended on Deal armed with cameras and recording equipment. They chartered boats to take them out to the Goodwin Sands on the night of February 13th. The atmosphere was a mix of excitement and dread. Everyone wanted to see the ghost ship, but no one truly knew what would happen if they did. The channel is a dangerous place, and the Goodwin Sands are unforgiving even to modern vessels. On the night of the expected return in 1998, the weather was atrocious. Thick fog blanketed the channel, and visibility was reduced to almost zero. The flotilla of boats carrying the curious observers bobbed in the dark gray swells. They waited for hours, straining their eyes against the gloom. Some claimed to hear the faint sound of violins playing a wedding waltz, while others reported seeing a green luminescence deep beneath the water. However, no definitive sighting of the ship itself was made that night. The fog had kept the Lady Lovibond hidden, or perhaps the spirits had chosen to remain below the surface. The lack of a clear sighting in 1998 led some to believe that the spell had finally been broken. They hoped that the souls of Simon Reed and Annetta had finally found peace. Others argued that the heavy fog simply obscured the phenomenon, which played out regardless of witnesses. There were unconfirmed reports from a passing freighter of a radar anomaly near the sands at the exact time of the wreck. The blip appeared on the screen for a few minutes before vanishing instantly, suggesting that the Lady Lovibond was still there, sailing through the ether. The legend of the Lady Lovibond serves as a grim reminder of the destructive power of jealousy. John Rivers destroyed dozens of lives because he could not bear to see another man happy. His selfish act created a scar on the location that has refused to heal for centuries. The Goodwin Sands remains a place of danger and mystery, where the line between the living and the dead feels incredibly thin. Sailors who traverse these waters still pay close attention to their charts and their instincts, knowing that history has a way of repeating itself. The next predicted appearance of the Phantom Brigantine is set for the year 2048. It is a date that many researchers and enthusiasts have marked on their calendars. Technology will have advanced significantly, by then perhaps allowing us to capture definitive proof of the haunting. Until then, the story lives on in the oral history of the Kent coast, passed down from father to son. The image of the white ribboned schooner smashing into the sands is etched into the collective memory of the maritime community. The Goodwin Sands themselves are a terrifying natural wonder. At low tide, they are firm enough to play cricket on, and matches have famously been held there. But as the tide turns, the sand becomes liquid, sucking down anything heavy that rests upon it. This geological characteristic makes it the perfect trap for ships and the perfect tomb for the Lady Lovibond. The wreck is likely buried dozens of feet deep, preserved in the anaerobic environment of the wet sand. It waits there in the dark for the 50-year cycle to trigger its spectral release. Modern surveys of the Goodwin Sands have revealed hundreds of anomalies buried beneath the sediment. While we can identify many of them as metal-hulled ships from the World Wars, the wooden wrecks of the 18th century are harder to spot. The Lady Lovibond is indistinguishable from the countless other wooden vessels that have met their doom in the same spot. This anonymity adds to the mystery, as there is no physical grave marker for the wedding party, only the recurring ghostly projection of their final moments. Those who walk the beaches of Deal and look out toward the horizon often feel a sense of unease. The Goodwin Sands are visible as a line of white water breaking in the distance, a constant reminder of the peril that lies just offshore. On quiet nights, when the wind is blowing from the east, locals say you can sometimes hear sounds that do not belong to the modern world. Faint cries and the creaking of timber carried over miles of open water. These auditory hallucinations keep the legend alive, even when the 50-year cycle is dormant. The story of the Lady Lovibond is more than just a ghost story. It is a cautionary tale about the fragility of life. One moment, the guests were celebrating a wedding with a bright future ahead of them, and the next, they were fighting for their lives in freezing water. It highlights how quickly joy can turn to tragedy when influenced by the darkness of human nature. The betrayal by a trusted friend is the most chilling aspect of the narrative, resonating with our deepest fears of trust and vulnerability. As we look toward the future, the year 2048 looms on the horizon. A new generation of ghost hunters and scientists will doubtless converge on the Goodwin Sands. They will bring underwater drones and thermal cameras, hoping to pierce the veil of time. Whether they will see the three-masted schooner rise from the depths, or simply stare into the empty fog, remains to be seen. But the legend ensures that the Lady Lovibond will never be truly forgotten. Until that night comes, the Lady Lovibond rests in her sandy grave, waiting for the stars to align once more. Captain Simon Reed holds his bride in the darkness, while John Rivers grips the wheel in eternal madness. The Goodwin Sands shift and change, covering and uncovering the bones of history. The phantom Brigantine continues its silent voyage through time, a spectral monument to a wedding day that ended in hell. The sea keeps its secrets well, but every 50 years, it offers us a terrifying glimpse of the past. The lingering dread of the Lady Lovibond is not just about a ghost ship, but about the endurance of strong emotions. If love can transcend death, then perhaps hate can as well. The malice of John Rivers was so potent that it scarred the very atmosphere, ensuring that his crime would be replayed forever. It is a thought that chills the soul, suggesting that our darkest moments might be the ones that grant us immortality. The Goodwin Sands waits patiently for its next anniversary, ready to stage the tragedy once again for those brave enough to watch.